disclaimer. I do not know a whole lot about the Geneva Conventions or any other body of international law like the Hague Regulations, aside from some surface level knowledge, so I may be misidentifying some cases or overlooking others. This is meant to be a joke video anyways. Also, there may be inconsistencies with footage because of save file issues. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones is the 8th game in the mainline series. I also haven't played it casually in a long time, so I figured I'd use this video as an excuse to do so. However, much like the other entries in the series, there is a good chance that at least one war crime is committed. Now, the goal is to figure out how much of a Geneva suggestion are the Geneva Conventions, as well as other rules of war, in the main game, so let's just get to it. We don't even have to wait 5 minutes into the game, and we run into a questionable case. Erica and Seth are fleeing to Frelia, and there are Grado soldiers pursuing them. While firing on retreating enemies is permissible, it's specifically on enemies. While Seth could be considered a combatant, as he did initiate an attack on Walter, Erica technically isn't, at least until the map starts, and is just there for the ride. Therefore, it can be considered a violation of the 1949 Geneva Conventions, at least according to Colombia. But it's not like Renee may be a blameless victim, because Fado ordered Seth to bring Erica to Frelia. And for those that have played FE8, Seth is nothing short of the Fire Emblem equivalent of a super soldier, which may actually be a war crime. But the argument that Seth is an incredibly well-trained soldier also holds ground, so it may also not be a war crime. Either way, I'm not entirely decided on this, and I'm not counting Fado deploying Seth as a war crime. In Chapter 1, Tana is held hostage at Fort Mulan by Brigitte, which is a violation of Article 37 of the 4th Geneva Convention. Erica also brought up what Grado soldiers have done to Renee's citizens. According to the princess herself, Grado soldiers destroyed homes, took their possessions, kidnapped women, and executed those that resisted. Destroying civilian homes wantonly is a violation of various Geneva Conventions, and therefore is a war crime. Taking non-military possessions from others is also a war crime of Article 18 of the 3rd Geneva Convention. Lastly, kidnapping and executing civilians that resisted are two separate violations of the Hague Regulations, because resisted is a very flexible word. Erica could just say that she meant people that said their treatment under occupation was unfair. There were also soldiers pursuing the Renee soldiers, but at that point they're cleared of any wrongdoing, because Erica is now considered a combatant. In Chapter 2, Erica and her gang are headed to Fort Renval in Grado, but they come across bandits attacking Ide, a village in Renee. For the purpose of this video, we'll count whatever happened here as war for the player's army, because calling the brigands that attacked Ide war criminals sounds weird. Still, Erica commits false flagging by lying about herself to Selena, a Grado general, if you visit the closest village with Erica. Then there is the can of worms named Ross, because he joins your army at the end of the map if he survives. According to the Geneva Conventions, the youngest a person can be while serving in the military is 15. So the question becomes a question on how old is Ross. And according to a GameFAQs forum, which is far from reliable, but the only thing I could find on the matter to be considered conclusive, Ross is generally accepted to be under 15, which does mean that Erica committed a war crime by recruiting him, as he is force deployed in the following chapter. Now we're in Chapter 3, where the group is headed after a thief who stole Erica's lunar bracelet. And Erica is technically a combatant at this point. This also leads them to Bozba's hideout. Even so, whether or not the thief, who is revealed to be Colm, committed a war crime is unclear, because he never directly attacked Grado's soldiers. So for the purpose of this video, I'll leave Colm alone. In Chapter 4, The only entity Erica's army fights is an army of undead and other abominations. While desecrating the dead is a violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions, there is no indication on who was responsible for desecrating the dead here, at least according to the player's knowledge, so no charges can be given to any potential culprits. Even if you want to argue that Seth burning the remains of revenants is a war crime because their human corpses reanimated, it is fair to assume that cremation is a dignified way to deal with the dead. In the beginning of Chapter 5, General Glenn orders Sar to find, detain, and execute Natasha, even ordering wanton destruction of homes if need be. That's one more war crime to the list, as this order violates various Geneva Conventions. Speaking of Natasha, she's an unarmed clergy or medic by technicality, and therefore pursuing her is another war crime. Also at the end of the map, if you visit all the houses, a villager tells Erica that Sar treated Renee citizens that lived in the border town of Seraphiu with contempt and brutality. That is a clear violation of the Hog regulations. So in Chapter 5X, Ephraim, Kyle, Ford, and Orson attack Fort Renville, seize it, and escape. Orson just goes missing during the operation, but nothing about perfidy can really be implied within the events of the chapter. Also, a Google search told me that treason wasn't specifically a war crime, so no violations here. And I'm sure some executor claims that Ford is a war crime, but much like with Seth, I'm not counting super soldiers. In Chapter 6, you fight Novala and his army, and Novala himself is a rather vile commander, who happens to be among the more brutal of the bunch so far. He betrayed confidence in Erica by a deal to free a child, but taking her bracelet and just warping the child away. Novala also leaves 3 Renee citizens to be eaten by a Bale, violating the Hog regulations on the treatment of citizens in occupied territory. I forgot to mention that the child was a hostage in this situation, which is 3 violations of Article 37 of the 4th Geneva Conventions because her parents were hostages as well. This is also the first map where you can fight healers, which are considered medics or chaplains, which could mean an offense for Erica, but you are never required to attack them to beat the chapter, so that clears Erica of wrongdoing in this map. After the map, and some plot exposition, the chapter ends. In comparison to Chapter 6, Chapter 7's commander, Murray, does not violate any war crimes. He's above them. He may use ballista on the map, but those are fine. The map goes without an unavoidable war crime, and although Orson commits perfidy, we don't know about that until Chapter 8. And, speak of the devil, in Chapter 8, Orson false flags Erica and Seth, betraying their confidence in the process, which is the most appropriate war crime charge to bring here. And in the intermittent map, A New Journey, it's revealed that Kalak destroyed Freyla's sacred stone. This is considered a war crime because the destruction of the stone made the monsters appear more frequently, notably the undead, and therefore it violates Article 34 of the Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions. With the route split, I will be taking the lead of Ephraim, but I will cover anything that comes up on Erica's route. In short, I will be using Ephraim's chapters, with some of Erica route's problems with convenient. In Chapter 9, in the Great Oak Capital, Vigard orders Kalak and Reeve to shatter the sacred stones of Johanna and Rouston, which makes 2 violations of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions, because I previously established that destroying a sacred stone is a war crime. As a side note, Tuso also wants to make sure that Occupy Renee territory has law and order happening, but Vigard says no. Meanwhile, closer to the map, Grotto soldiers capture Tana, and General Geb orders that she be thrown into a cell to be given a thorough investigation. While this could just be standard protocol for him, Geb did note that she was a treat for the eyes, so this could mean that Geb may have wanted to have his way with her. From what a basic Google search has revealed to me, intent to commit a crime is considered a crime, and the crime here is a violation of physical torture against prisoners. Then there's also the matter of Amelia, who's about the same age as Ross according to her B support with him, and Ross is generally accepted to be under 15. That's another war crime for Geb, as it violates the Geneva Convention's definition on child soldiers. But with Ephraim, while he doesn't explicitly ask for Amelia's help in the recruitment conversation, he even knows that she's just a child. All he asks for her is to surrender, which isn't a war crime. Amelia could just sit on the bench after that for the rest of the game. In addition to all of that, there's also the issues of priests that come with sleep stays. I previously said that attacking clergy and medics is a war crime, but that's only if they're unarmed. The two priests in this map have sleep staves, which can be interpreted to be chemical weapons, and therefore would be two violations of the Geneva Gas Protocol. In Chapter 10, the closest thing that could be considered a war crime would be when Baron escaped with his subordinates, but that's desertion, which is not quite a war crime, but more of a domestic one, so I'm not adding anything to the tally beat from this chapter. In Chapter 11, Reeve unleashed an army of the undead, and as previously established, this is a violation of the Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions, as it disrespects the deceased. Aside from that, nothing of interest happens in this map. Besides, Dosla is not a child soldier, he's 47. In Chapter 12, Reeve unleashes more monsters in this map, including undead, which makes another violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions. One of the monsters he summons has a toxin lens, and poison weapons are a violation of the Hog regulations on poisoned weapons. There's also the issue of Ewan, who, according to that unreliable but closest thing to reliable I found GameFAQs forum, is under 15, so using him would be a war crime. Besides, have you seen his hero's artwork? However, a similar story can be made with Amelia, where the map can end just after you get Ewan, and he can avoid combat altogether, so Ewan can avoid being a war crime for Ephraim. Either way, after the map, no further war crimes were committed. In Chapter 13, Selena actually doesn't use Mer as a hostage, so she's cleared of that war crime. That doesn't mean she's absolved of war crimes as a whole, however, because the pirates and brigands in this map can pillage the villages, and those pirates and brigands are under the banner of Grado. Therefore, this is a violation of the Hog regulations when it comes to pillaging. There's also a troubadour with a sleep staff, which has previously been established to be a violation of the CWC from the Geneva Gas Protocol. Beside that, nothing else has been violated. In Chapter 14, the player learns that Vigard being alive is a violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions because it's desecration of the dead. There are also 4 status staff users on this map, which means there are 4 violations of the CWC from the Geneva Gas Protocol. After the map is completed, Ephraim upholds the 3rd Geneva Conventions by humanely dealing with Null. It even motivates Null to join Ephraim's side. Regardless of theatrics, Null reveals that Leon destroyed Grado's Sacred Stone, which, as previously established, is a violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions because it summons undead. Chapter 15 is a route map, and a route map that features a troubadour that does not have a sleep staff or berserk staff or silent staff, so one of the twins gets another war crime on their head in attacking an unarmed medic. Now, who would this charge be associated with is a tough question, because Ephraim is closest to the troubadour, but Erica is also present and the target. So, who gets it? Well, in this playthrough, Garrett killed her, so it's on him. There's another troubadour with a berserk staff, which is another violation of the CWC from the Geneva Gas Protocol. At the end of the map, Erica and Ephraim meet in a fort not far from the Johanna Hall, and they discuss what happened since they split off in Freya. Here, I will briefly go over the major war crimes that happened in Erica's route, which are Walter's perfidy on Glenn, Carlisle's perfidy on Isamir, Carlisle destroying the Sacred Stone, and the murder of a non-combatant in Isamir. I probably overlooked some, but right now I can't quite think of any notable cases. In Chapter 16, it's known that Leon violated the Geneva Conventions in regards to the deceased to make Orson betray Renee by reviving his wife Monica. There is also a priest here with the Berserk Staff, which is a violation of the CWC for the Geneva Gas Protocol. Thankfully, Ephraim upholds the Geneva Convention in regards to the deceased by putting Monica back to rest. In In Chapter 17, another violation of the Hog regulations occur when Grado remnants, headed by the Demon King, attack river folk. Thankfully, the map can be cleared in rather fast fashion, so nothing else can be violated. During the events of Chapter 18, the Demon King sets up an army of abominations, but that's not why he has another war crime under his belt, because no undead are in this map. The war crime would be where he destroys Renee's Sacred Stone, which has previously been established to be a violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions because of the undead. Aside that, Gorgonics don't really count as child soldiers, because quite frankly it's way too weird to talk about them, as they aren't even humanoid. However, all that's just in Ephraim's route. In Erica's route, there's an additional war crime where the Demon King commits perfidy and gets his hands on destroying the Sacred Stone of Renee that way. I'll count the route split here because it's a drastic difference between the lords. In Chapter 19, Reeve explicitly states that he intends to go after Ralston's Sacred Stone, and I have covered with Geb and Tana that intent to commit a crime is similar to committing the crime. And the crime here is a violation of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Convention. You know, the whole respect the dead kind of thing. Aside from that, nothing else. In Chapter 20, it's revealed that the Demon King is back at it again with violating Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions by resuscitating Morva into a Draco zombie. Further taunting the laws of war, the Demon King has 2 poisoned weapons on his abominable soldiers, a clear violation of the Hog regulations. Ephraim upholds the Geneva Conventions in regards to the dead in this map by killing Morva, but in my playthrough it was Seth that did it. There are 2 Draco zombies in the first map of Endgame, which makes 2 violations of Additional Protocols 1 of the Geneva Conventions, which calls for the respect of the deceased. After the first map ends, it's revealed that the Demon King committed perfidy against Leon by tricking him to think that the massive disaster that will strike Grado could be averted, when in reality it wasn't. In return, the twins of Renee decide to torture a prisoner of war in the Demon King by destroying his soulless body. The reason he is considered a prisoner is because La Rochelle notes that his soul rages against his prison, that being Ralston's Sacred Stone. The Demon King even screams as he dies, so it can be interpreted as torture. So how many war crimes are committed in the main campaign of Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones? According to my calculations, I came up with 54 war crimes. That's more than the amount of playable maps in FE8, which is funny if you think about it. I'd like to thank Dark Roxas and Guo for proofreading the script, as it helped if I missed something. I guess that's the end of the video, and I'll see you the next time I feel like uploading.